Hey everybody, it is History Helper, and I'm Mr. Young. We got 20 years of teaching experience to help you cram for that exam for your U.S. history tests. Today's episode, it's all about that imperialism. And I know what you're thinking. Who's that guy? Because he doesn't look like you. That's a better looking version of me in some other dimension. Let's continue. Here we go. We got U.S. imperialism. The time period is 1898 to 1920. And let's look at this political cartoon. We got baby America there with the 13 states. And it's going to grow and grow and grow. And boy, it's going to grow. And it goes to 1899 here. We got Cuba, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico because of the Spanish-American War. And look at all those hands that are coming out to say, let's do business. We got China and England and Germany and Italy and all those other guys. So that pretty much is talking about U.S. imperialism. Let's continue talking about it. What the heck is imperialism? Well, look at that. We got Darth Vader there because it's all about the empire. Building an empire by dominating other nations, whether through politics or your military, economics, maybe just by using the force. And you too can build an empire, even if it's a carpet empire. Okay, for real. Why would you want to build an empire? Well, I'm going to give you three reasons. Reason number one, raw materials. Trading partners, valuable resources, gold, oil, gas, all of these different minerals that you may find. Yeah, so raw materials, lumber. All right, so next we got military or strategic interests. Look at all of the different naval bases that we have in the Pacific Ocean because we have these different islands. So yeah, we got all of that strategery going on for us. And then finally, your religious ideological interest, meaning this, we want to spread our culture, our religion, our politics, our way of thinking. And this is also known as the white man's burden. Rudyard Kipling made this poem, and it was all about the white man's burden. It was the name of the poem. And basically it's saying Europe and America, they feel compelled to help out these poor third world countries and, replace their whole system with our system because, ours is the best. So that's also nicknamed white man's burden. And there you go. Those are your top three reasons why you'd want to build that empire. Let's go with these vocabulary words. Isolationism. This one's easy. That means to isolate. When you keep out of other countries' business. Your friends are fighting and they're like, what do you think? Hey, I'm staying out of it. I'll let you two work things out. That's isolationism. America's big on isolation, until World War II. We didn't want to go to World War I. We tried to stay out. We tried to isolate as much as possible. Then they pulled us in. Next word, annex. To take control of another area. You're going to annex that area. And now you're claiming it's yours. Expansionism. Look at that picture. You go back for seconds on Thanksgiving dinner, yeah, you're going to have some expansionism. Now, if you are a country and you are expanding, that means you're getting more and more territory because, you're growing as a country. So, how did the U.S. expand in the late 19th and early 20th century? Spanish-American Wars. We got Guam, Puerto Rico, the Philippines. We could have had Cuba. We'll talk about that later. And they're all going to become U.S. territories. We annexed Hawaii in 1867, I think. Yeah, we bought Alaska. We're going to talk all about those things. But first, the open door policy with China. Everybody's getting a slice of that pie that is China. And we also want it. So we tell basically all the other nations, hey, no one's going to have a monopoly on China. We also get a slice of that pie. We're going to have an open door policy, right? Everybody's allowed into China. And so that's what happened. It's the open door policy. It's saying you got your sphere of influence there, France and Japan and Britain. We want ours as well. So here's the deal. China eventually is going to get irritated, and they're going to have the Boxer Rebellion. The Boxer Rebellion, it's this uprising of Chinese workers. And at first they're going after Christian missionaries because Christian missionaries don't go well with their Buddhism. And so they're changing stuff. And at first Christian missionaries were were focused on, and they were being killed. Then it just became any foreigners, because the foreigners are no doubt trading with China, and they're probably smuggling stuff with China, and there is just a lot of ripping off China. So we have these worker class that rebel, and they start to kill a lot of foreigners. Well, the United States, along with other countries, we kind of form our own, military army to squash this, and it puts an end to the Boxer Rebellion. Right? If this was Chinese history, we would talk more about it. But this is U.S. history, and we've talked enough, so we're moving on. All right. So we have a Chinese worker here. We have some people fighting. We got, unfortunate blood. Next, Cuba. Yeah, did you know that Cuba and America used to be besties? Yes, that's right. Up until the 1950s, in fact, we used to it was like the Casino Vegas world of the Caribbean. And then Fidel Castro took over, and then they decided to go with communism. May not have been the best choice, but up until then, we used to be pretty tight with Cuba. And so Cuba is being ruled in the late 1800s by Spain. And Spain is misruling them. They are absolutely abusing them. Why? Because Cuba wants to be its own independent country, and they don't want Spain to rule over them. So a lot of the Cubans were rebelling. Well, Spain doesn't know exactly who to put in jail, because they can't tell one Cuban that's rebelling from the other Cuban that's following the rules. And so there was just basically draconian rules put in place, like super, super punishing rules. And here's a little political cartoon. We got Cuba there in the frying pan of Spain, and out of the frying pan and into the fire, anarchy. And so basically it's telling America, hey, we need to get involved in Cuba, because once they get rid of Spain, it's just going to go into anarchy, and that's not good for business for America. And so let's get involved. Well, this is what's going to happen. This guy, Valeriano Weyler, he is in charge of putting down the rebel forces, and he basically puts them in concentration camps. These are hideous pictures here. And these are the pictures. Oh, look at that guy. It's literally, it reminds you of the Holocaust, right? The Nazi concentration camps. What's going on? These pictures will wind up in American newspapers, and it is going to cause America just to shake their fist and say, what is going on in Cuba? How dare Spain, right? Because it's all about that yellow journalism. So we have yellow journalism. I would compare that, honestly, to today's 24-hour news cable channels. MSNBC, Fox News, whether it's to the left or to the right, it's all sensationalized, right? You see, in respectable newspapers, can you believe what this person said about that person? It's turned into high school, right? It's turned into just the most clickbait thing that you could see. And how is this respectable journalism? It's not. It's yellow journalism. So Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst, they run two gigantic newspapers out of New York, right? And they are absolutely blowing up Cuba, right? They're saying, oh my gosh, can you believe what's going on in Cuba? In fact, William Randolph Hearst says, you furnish the pictures and I'll furnish the war. That's how powerful influencers these guys are. They're going to basically create a war, and it's going to sell more newspapers, right? It's the sensational journalism. Well, so this guy here, he is Dubois de l'Homme. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but if you say it fast enough and you say it with confidence, people think you said it right. It's the Spanish ambassador to the United States. And this guy, he writes a letter where he criticizes President McKinley. I mean, he really just has some beef with the president. And he's saying the president is weak, and he talks a big game, but he doesn't have any. He's just lame. He's a would-be politician. Anyway, of course, yellow journalism is going to sensationalize this. Oh my gosh, did you hear what he said about this guy? Well, President McKinley. And people are now shaking their fist even more. How dare you? How dare Spain do this? So trouble is happening in Cuba, right? And it's getting really bad. Teddy Roosevelt, let's talk about him. He is not the president at this time. We said it was McKinley. He is not even McKinley's vice president at this time. He will eventually be. Right now, he actually is just the assistant secretary of the Navy for McKinley's administration. And he is big time on imperialism. Well, he knows that, oh, there's going to be a war, and he is pretty critical of President McKinley. In fact, he said, he has the backbone of a chocolate eclair. And I don't know if you know this, but chocolate eclairs don't have a lot of bones in them, okay? So he's going to resign his position once the war is declared. He resigns his position in the Navy, and he organizes a volunteer army, because that's how Teddy Roosevelt rolls. He makes his own army, and he becomes a hero of, well, we'll talk about that just a bit. Ready? Here we are, the Rough Riders. That's his volunteer army. So I got a couple pictures here of the Rough Riders, and I also have a picture here of the Buffalo Soldiers, because when the war does happen, we have this big taking of San Juan Hill, right? Buffalo Soldiers were part of it, but Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders get the most credit for it, right? And this is what's going to throw Teddy Roosevelt into the political arena. Everybody loves him. And as we'll see in our next unit on the Progressive Era, he does not have to be in the pocket of any business, because he's already got people's vote because they love him so much. He's just that rough and tumble type of guy. Moving on. So this is what propels us into the war. The USS Maine. So we have a ship. It goes down to Cuba. It's there to basically calm everybody down, because, I mean, it's a big battleship. And it's also there to pick up Americans. We're going to pick you. We got a couple hundred Americans down there. You know what? Let's pick them up. It's there for a few days. And then something happens. It blows up. How did it explode? Well, of course, the yellow journalists are going to tell you how it exploded. But in reality, it's most likely it exploded because of coal. These type of ships ran on coal, and often it would overheat, and if there were any ammunitions nearby, those would explode. And so this was not uncommon. And so this happens. The Maine blows up, right? And it becomes the battle cry of America. Remember the Maine and the with Spain. All right? We see a little button right there. And so this appears in newspapers. Look at that Neanderthal, that beast, that caveman with the belt that says Spain. Yeah, that's Spain. And look what he's doing. Maine sailors murdered by Spain. Even though that's probably not even close to being true, that's what the yellow journalism is going to say. Here's another headline. Maine explosion caused by bomb or torpedo. Notice how they don't have coal in there at all. It's either a bomb or a torpedo. It's got to be one of those, because obviously we have sabotage. It's not an accident. And look at this right here, that line where it says DEC Pendleton just arrived from Havana, says he overheard talk there of a plot to blow up the ship. Did he? Did he? Well, that's why there's yellow journalism. All right, so that's going to basically egg on everybody's opinion. Oh my gosh, we've got to fight, says the New York Journal. We must declare for war. And all these other newspapers saying the same thing. So McKinley says, oh, well, I gotta. I don't want to be called a chocolate eclair again. So he declares war. Well, he gets Congress to declare war. Teddy Roosevelt quits, and they go and they fight in Cuba. It lasts 3 months. That's it. Right? There's Teddy Roosevelt there fighting. 460 died from battle, so not very big, but 5,000 plus died from malaria, yellow fever. It's those mosquitoes, right? That's the real enemy. So the war's pretty much over pretty quick, right? Within 3 months. We get Cuba. We'll talk about what we're going to do with Cuba, but we also want those Philippines. So here's what's going on in the Caribbean. We're going to get Puerto Rico as part of this, but as this is happening, we're sailing out to Manila, right? The capital of the Philippines. And here's the headlines. Dewey smashes Spain's fleet. You see, Spain also had control over the Philippines. And guess what? Yeah, the Philippines were also in rebellion, looking forward to an independent country from Spain. So America shows up. And Spain is thinking, do we really want to keep the Philippines? So they kind of gave a half-hearted, you guys are going to win. So, and also their ships were not as good as American ships because, we had like made of steel and theirs were still made of wood. So, yeah, it's a pretty easy victory for that as well. And we're going to end up with the Philippines. In case you're wondering where the Philippines is, there it is. They got China, you got Japan up there, Australia way down there. There it is in the South China Sea, Pacific Ocean. That's the place. So the Filipinos were like, okay, so America, what are you going to do? Are you going to let us be independent? And of course, we say, I don't think we're going to do that. And so this guy, Emilio Aguinaldo, he is the leader of the Filipino uprising. And sure enough, for quite some time, we are fighting a war of independence. And eventually, I mean, this is another, 48 years later, the Philippines gain their independence, right? Here's our political cartoon here. Let's say to Uncle Sam, hey, look at all that. That's the rebel armies. Is it really worth it? It's a game that loses much to win little. That's what happened. All right, so here's the Treaty of Paris. This is the one that's going to end the Spanish-American War. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, wait, the Treaty of Paris? I thought that ended the Revolutionary War. Well, it did. I thought that ended World War II. Yeah, well, it did. I thought it ended the Vietnam. You know what? They got a lot of Treaty of Parises. I don't know what it is about Paris that caused people to say, hey, let's sign the treaty in Paris. But that's what they do. Go figure. So Cuba is freed from Spanish rule. And we say we are not going to make Cuba a territory. More on that later. Spain gives up Puerto Rico and the island of Guam. That's now our territory. And the U.S. pays $20 million to Spain for the Philippines, thinking, wow, what a deal we got. And I think Spain is like, suckers, because the Philippines want to be independent. This right here shows the rest of the world the U.S. is a power to be dealt with. We are an imperial power. Don't mess with the United States. We got a navy that defeated Spain, who at one time had what was known as the Spanish Armada, right? It used to be the most powerful country, and we beat them in 3 months. So that's how that goes. That's what we're talking about. The American Anti-Imperialist League immediately says, wait, why are we doing this? Mark Twain, Andrew Carnegie, William Jennings Bryan, these people we've talked about in other units, the Western Unit, the Gilded Age, and they are not interested whatsoever in us being imperialistic. Why? Well, here's what we discussed in my class. We decided that when you have other colonies and other land that you have to take care of, you can get sucked into a war pretty good. In fact, let's think about this. 1899, we get the Philippines. Fast forward to the 1930s. Japan is being imperialistic. They're going around China and Korea and all these other island nations, and they're taking over. I mean, they're super imperialistic during this time period. And they see America in the Philippines, and they're threatened by America. So what do? Well, they don't attack the Philippines. They attack Pearl Harbor in 1941, and that's what sucks us into the war. So, Mark Twain, Andrew Carnegie, William Jennings Bryan, I guess you had a point. So there you go. They're talking all about isolationism is what they wanted. So the Teller Amendment, basically the Teller Amendment and the Platt Amendment are going to define what's the deal with Cuba. And Cuba, we're not going to own you. We're not going to have you as a territory. We're going to let you to govern yourself in a sense, but you cannot go into any agreement with other foreign powers. Fidel Castro would say, that was so long ago. Hello, USSR? But that's going to come later when we talk about the Cold War. All right. We say, hey, listen, Cuba, we can intervene in your affairs if necessary, just to make sure everything's going smoothly, because we don't want problems. It's only 90 miles away from Miami. We don't want problems in Cuba. And also, Cuba, you have to let us have this area called Guantanamo Bay And that's where the U.S. naval base is. And even during the Cuban Missile Crisis of the 60s and all the problems that we had, we still had Guantanamo Bay. All right. So anyway, that's the deal with Cuba. The deal with Puerto Rico is they are an unincorporated territory. They're a territory. At that time, their citizens were not citizens of the United States, but eventually they would become citizens. And here's where the money's made. Import duties. Yes, that's right. Puerto Rico, you could do business with America, but we are going to be taxing and tariffing and all these other things that we can now do. And so there were some cases brought up like, hey, is this allowed? Are you allowed to do this? Constitutional rights are not automatically extended to territories. So Puerto Rico citizens, you do not get the constitutional rights that American citizens get. Congress had the power to decide what these rights are. Now, eventually, Congress is going to change some things about Puerto Rico, citizenship, and etc. And import duties laid down by the Forester Act or the Foraker Act, totally legal. I like how this ruling is the thing we said earlier. Yeah, that's still good. We're still going to say that's totally legal because, money. All right, so this is Teddy Roosevelt's policy. Speak softly, but carry a big stick. He's not going to get in anybody's face. He's not going to be jingoistic. All right, that's a word for you. Jingoistic. It's like you got patriotism, you got nationalism, and then you got jingoism. Okay, patriotism is this. My dad's the best. Okay, that's great. Patriotism. Yeah. Nationalism is my dad's the best. My dad could beat up your dad. Right or wrong. My dad's the best. All right, so that's nationalism. Jingoism is this. My dad's the best. My dad can beat up your dad. In fact, he is beating up your dad right now. And then you look over and sure enough, punches in the face. That's jingoistic. It's usually extreme patriotism to the point of violence against others. All right? So he's not doing that. He's speaking softly. He's saying, listen, here's the deal. When he's president, this is the way it is. But carry a big stick. And you know what that big stick is? The Navy, right? So he's telling all foreign powers, especially you, Europe, don't mess around in the Caribbean. This is our territory. And he's marching around, bare feet or not. He's marching around there with his big gigantic stick. And he will beat your brains out, Europe, if you dare mess around in any of this territory. We'll talk about his corollary in just a second. So that's the big stick diplomacy. Who said it? Teddy Roosevelt, right? And what was the target? It's the Latin American, Caribbean nations. They are under our protection. So keep out Europe. You are not even going to bother us. So next comes the Panama Canal. Now check out this. In Panama, they wanted to build the Panama Canal because what a shortcut, right? We have this 16,000 miles or 8,000 miles. Think of the money that you could save. You're spending half the money on coal, right? Half the money on the trip. So, of course, we want that Panama Canal to happen. All right, here's Teddy Roosevelt right there in Panama when the construction begins because, he's a hands-on guy. What? Go down to Panama and actually use some big, heavy equipment? Of course he's going to do that. It's Teddy Roosevelt. That's how he rolls, right? So we see Panama Canal right there, and there's Panama in the green on the bottom. So you can get a kind of idea what we're talking about. The Caribbean Sea to the Pacific Ocean. This is a perfect spot because it's got a lake there. Now, granted, the lake is actually not on sea level, so there's going to be some problems. That's why Spain tried to build the Panama Canal in the 1500s, could not do it, did not have the technology. There's Teddy Roosevelt there wearing his big, gigantic crown with the Panama Canal there. France tried it in the 1800s, the earlier 1800s. They couldn't do it. And so now we're going to do it. Here's the problem, though. Panama is under control of Colombia. Colombia is the first country there in South America connected to Panama. So we tell Colombia, listen, we're going to give you $10 million. And then we're going to give you $250,000 every year just for letting us use this land for the Panama Canal. And Colombia said, no. Oh, Teddy Roosevelt's like, well, in that case, we decide, hey, Panama, how would you like to break up with Colombia and be your own independent country? Meanwhile, the Philippines are like, really? 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 Because that's what they want, right? So we're going to let Panama be an independent country, break up with Colombia. We got your back. If Colombia does anything, we'll flex on them, right? We got that big stick ready to go. And all we're going to do is we'll offer you the same deal, 10 million bucks, and then we'll give you $250,000 a year for the rights to this land so we can build this canal. Panama was like, well, duh, of course we'll do that. And so they did. Broke up with Colombia, they did. All right, so here it is. You can see that the canal is not just one big gigantic ditch. It's actually a series of locks. And when you go through, it's going to take a couple hours to get through this, not because it's so long, but because it takes so long. Because when you go through, you have to go into the water, and then that section fills up with more water, raising your ship so that you can go to the next section, which raises up. You can go through some of the lake, you can go through some of the other locks, the big, gigantic Madden Lake, and then you are lowered down so that you can go out the other side. And that drains, and you go to another lock, and that drains. So you can see why it takes quite some time to go through there. But hey, you're saving so much money, and obviously you're saving days upon days upon days of travel as well. That's it. That's the Panama Canal. Let's now talk about Alaska. Now, we know where Alaska is. It's up there, north. It's over by Canada. So Alaska, we bought that 1867 for $7.2 million. We gave it to Russia. Russia was like, take it. Why would you want it? But okay. And so everybody said, William Seward, who was the Secretary of State at that point, he buys it, right? He takes out money from the government, says, here we go, I'm going to buy this. And everybody's like, you are an idiot. You moron. Why would you buy that? They called it Seward's Folly, Seward's Icebox, right? Then they discovered gold. And everybody was like, Seward, you are a genius. And then they discovered oil, which is even bigger. We got more money from the oil than the gold. So yeah, Alaska turns out to be a brilliant idea. Have you ever seen an Alaskan flat tire? This is what it looks like. Doggos. So we got raw materials, plenty of $3.44 billion of materials from Alaska. Yowza. And then, of course, all that pink and yellow. Oh, my goodness. Pink and yellow? Sign me up. Minerals, oils, gas. You get the idea. Alaska, good idea. I'm so glad we bought it. Hawaii. Now, here's the deal. We're not going to buy Hawaii. We are actually going to have a political coup and take over Hawaii. It's we're going to annex it. Annexation. Crossroads of the Pacific, that's where Hawaii is. We know where Hawaii is. It's right there. U.S. missionaries, prospectors, they arrive in Hawaii in the early 1800s. By 1870s, it's dominated by sugar and fruit. Sugar and fruit. That's going to be so much money coming in, it's ridiculous. The good news is this. With Hawaii, we said, hey, Hawaii, how would you like to do business with America? You can make a lot of money. And so Hawaii's like, okay, that sounds like a good idea, right? Just let us have some land so we can, build these fruit plantations, make a deal. So we dealt with their people in power, the king, right? And everything was working out swell, according to America. And we even had a tariff, the McKinley tariff on Hawaii, that said, we're going to now charge you a little something tariff. You know what a tariff is. When you ship stuff over to the United States. Okay, but here's the problem. Queen Liliuokalani, she gets in charge. This is her right there. She gets in charge, and Sanford Dole, this guy right here, Sanford Dole is an American businessman, all about that fruit, and he is not happy with how the Queen is handling things. The Queen doesn't want to do business with America. She is much more difficult than the previous people in charge. And Queen Liliuokalani, She is very much concerned about taking back some of that land, especially Sanford Dole's land. Oh, he can't handle that. Yeah, Dole, that guy, the guy from the pineapple, that Dole. So you see where his interest is. You see where his interest is. It's all about that money. And so he convinces America, why don't we just go ahead and take out the queen? And so they do. The Hawaiian pear is now fully ripe, and this is the golden hour for the United States to pluck it. So that's what they did. They plucked it. They annexed Hawaii. And this is the Secretary of State under President Harrison that said that. So now we got Hawaii. We got Alaska. We got Hawaii. They're not states yet. That comes later. And they are now under our control. You can see, well, Alaska, we bought it. Hawaii, we basically just took it. And you can see from this major trading routes why it was such a great idea. Because look at where they all go. That's money, money, money. And, America. All right. So Roosevelt corollary, we're almost done. During this time period, Theodore Roosevelt added to the idea of the Monroe Doctrine. Now, that's way back in U.S. History 1. Monroe Doctrine basically told Europe, stay out of the Western Hemisphere. So Roosevelt adds this, right? The Roosevelt corollary. He says, stay out of the Western Hemisphere and especially Latin America. Do not mess around with that. Remember that big stick he's walking around there? Yeah, that's the Roosevelt corollary. I will interfere in Latin America so that Europeans can't. You got a problem with that? Roosevelt says big stick diplomacy. Taft says dollar diplomacy. So basically, this is dollar diplomacy. U.S. business invest in countries in Latin America. We convince them to be friendly to the United States. We help them with their roads, their railroads, their infrastructure. We build up their trading partner abilities, and then they trade with us. They don't need Europe. They don't need anybody except us, right? We're their besties. And so that's going to build up trading partners. That's his dollar diplomacy is what I'm saying. So China is doing that right now. I think they spent $1 billion on infrastructure throughout Africa and Southeast Asia. They're doing the same thing because, well, it worked for us in 1898 to 1900s. So why not? All right. So there it is. I knew I had it. Dollar diplomacy. Political cartoon time. Look at this. This is an anti-imperialist cartoon, if you ask me, because here's Uncle Sam. He's dealing with all of those new territories and new areas. Cuba, Puerto Rico, Philippines, Hawaii. And yeah, that seems a little racist down there, drawing Hawaii. But that's the white man's burden, right? That's their ideological overtones there. And so, why do we want to mess with all these kids? I suppose if you really, really love babies, you might see this as a great imperialist reason. But yeah, that seems like a handful, right? That seems like a bad day of babysitting, if you ask me. And finally this. Look at how large Teddy Roosevelt is. Teddy Roosevelt is larger than life in this picture. He's not the big stick in his hands. He got a shovel in his hands. And what's he doing? He's building the Panama Canal. Look at that, the guy from Panama, new treaty. And where is he dumping all the dirt? On Bogota, Colombia. Hey, Colombia, you had your chance. You don't get money. You just get this dirt. And all these ships that are waiting. Come on, let us in, let us in. Is it done? Is it done? Are we done? Are we done? And so, yeah, that is definitely showing, I like Teddy Roosevelt, said the cartoonist.